Welcome back to the episode here on the Hard and Hustle podcast. Next guest says we talk about resilience like it's a badge, but what if the system didn't make people fight so hard to survive? What if it lifted them instead of demanding them to overcome? Nicole, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Of of course. Thank you so much. You started as a therapist working with kids in foster care. What did you witness in those early years that made you actually stay and fight?
Oh gosh, those kids quickly just became my hero. Their capacity to adapt, to forgive, thrive through chaos, quite frankly, was just so inspiring that it put my daily life inconveniences kind of into a whole new perspective. And it was like, well, if they can go through that and they can continue to fight and thrive, who am I to say that I can't do anything, right? That I put my mind to.
And you didn't just work in the system, you actually lived it. What changed in your worldview after actually becoming a foster and adoptive mom yourself?
Oh gosh. I think it probably started with a mom that I worked with pretty early in my career. Um, I got called out to a home. There was a crisis going on. Um, and she had looked at me and started disclosing her own childhood trauma in the midst of trying to parent her kids. And she said, "Where were you for me? Like, I'm over here doing so much better than what was done for me. Nobody came and saved me. And I've
Wow.
done all this and I've come so far by myself, and you're coming in here and you're still telling me I'm not good enough." Um, and she just had an indelible mark on me. And she gifted me a greater curiosity about people, more interest in their origin story, and a whole lot less judgment, and made me really appreciate like the uniqueness of experience and perspective. And so a lot of that experience then led my husband and I to decide to foster and adopt. And then, to your question's point, um, it, it was frustrating at times when I knew how a system was supposed to work and then saw it
Yeah.
not work. Infuriating would be a better word at some points, if I'm being honest. But then there's just this odd mix of like tragedy and joy. So like I love my kids to my bones, and being their mom is one of the greatest gifts and greatest joys of my life, but it's born out of this depth of tragedy that the people who
Hmm.
created them didn't get to raise them, and that they
Yeah.
missed out on a lot of experiences that I got to have being raised in my family of origin. So it's definitely like this weird mix of grief and joy.
It is. It is. Before I even get into my adoption story, to kind of give that, because I think we talked about me being adopted. It is very hard, and I think I didn't realize all the all the hard work and sacrifice that my mom that adopted me really put into place, right? Because for a long time I was asking myself the why me, the what would life have been. Did my mom not love me? Like, you start asking all these questions, and it's not that we don't receive love in the household. It's that when you find out you're adopted, the question automatically becomes why, right? And and
Yep.
and you want to know. And anyway, so did you adopt kids prior to you having your own kids, or did you
So
just adopt kids?
we only fostered and adopted. So my daughters are their biological siblings,
I love
and
it.
they came into our lives when they were 6 and 10. So they very much knew that they were quote unquote
Yeah.
in the system. And then their adoptions were finalized. They were 9 and 13, and they are 19 and 23 today, and two of the best human beings on the face of the planet, if you ask me.
I love it. That is actually a very hard age. 6 and 10, you said, right?
Yeah.
Why? Why? Because a lot of times people adopt, they don't go older. They usually adopt younger, and that's what
Mhm.
happens. These older kids stay in the system a lot of the times, and don't get adopted. What made you go 6 and 10?
I think it was really those experiences of having worked with those families in my career.
Got it.
I saw what those kids experienced, and a lot of times, like like to use the image of the iceberg, right? Like people see what's on top, and they might see
Hmm.
kids acting out, they might see kids angry at a system. But I really had the honor and the privilege of working with so many kids that I got to see that underneath, that I got to
Yeah.
see that fear of abandonment, that mistrust of a system, all of the things that kind of went into what can be challenging about bringing older kids into your home. So when we signed up to be foster parents, we had said you really get to pick, right? Like, what ages are you willing to foster? Are there certain behaviors or certain things that you're uncomfortable with? And we pretty
Mhm.
much said any and all are welcome. The one thing we said that we couldn't do was if any child unfortunately had a history of cruelty to animals, because we had animals in our home and we didn't feel like that would be fair. So I think it was just kind of the luck of the draw that our kids came into care and they needed a home, and there we were.
That's so good. Because so many times you hear kids at that age just kind of get overlooked. I was actually 2 years old when I was taken from my biological mom and fostered with my aunt. And my sister was 6 months or something like that. And you just talk about just life happening. I even think about I don't have a huge relationship with my biological mom. Actually, I don't have a relationship at all with my biological mom. I know who she is. Unfortunately, she's still, an addict, right? Just living on the streets. Very unfortunate to even think about that. And sometimes I think to myself, I wish that I can just have this conversation. Actually, I think at some point, I'm 35 years old now, and realizing life as a parent, and someone put this in perspective. How do you think your mom feels that all her 10 kids were stripped away from her? What do you think her self confidence is at? What do you think she knows her worth? And it's like, you're right. And she might have been fighting for these kids. I just don't know the story. And not that I want to know the story at this point in my life, but more of I want to have the conversation, let her know you're still worthy. You're still here. Your kid, you can still really build that relationship, and really kind of put a perspective of look what God did for me and he could do the same for you, to really bring it back to faith. So when I hear what you've done, it's not easy work. This is not easy work, and I can imagine that you've seen kind of both ends. Those happy parents that have taken in kids and are just full of joy, but you've also seen those parents that are broken, that they can't continue
Yeah.
to raise their kids. So what a hard space to be in, but kudos to you for saying, I want to give back to this space as well. I love when I actually get to meet people that say they're adopted or they've adopted someone, because I feel like, wow, how cool is that? And I don't know that we give that stigma that it is cool,
It is
and,
cool. And, the way I described it, actually, just in a conversation with my 19-year-old just over the weekend, was um, what makes us even more special is that we chose each other.
hmm
We had a
hmm
choice to
yeah.
adopt them, and they were old enough that they had a choice. They could stay with us or they could go try to live with another family. Like, we opened that door. And so the four of us chose each other. And how many family units get to say that you're a family by choice?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I had to, again, as a young kid, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And I actually remember I was 18 years old, left my mom's house. There was just so much animosity there. She raised 7 kids on her own, by the way. So shout out to her raising 7 kids as a single mom, right? She raised
Absolutely.
four of her
Yeah.
own and then adopted three. And she would have done more, but I mean, she already have seven, So I I remember going out into the world, and the first conversation I had with my mom and dad was probably like at 20 something years old, and I was so excited as a child, as a young adult actually, and thinking, oh my God, I got my mom, biological dad on the phone for the first time. But their mindset went back to the moment that everything was happening in their life. Like, how could you do this, do that? And I was so broken. I'm like, man, the first time I get to have my mom and dad on the phone, and all they could talk about was the past. At that moment, I realized I was chasing the wrong thing. My mom was the one that raised me, and I give her all the praise and all the glory, because without her, where would I be? Right. And I see other brothers and sisters, not all of them because I don't have relationships with them, but the ones that I do, and they would tell me what their life was like growing up. And I'm like, I'm just so thankful that my mom made these sacrifices to move away from where we were located to find us a better place. And even though sometimes we don't see the better in it at the moment,
Yeah.
now that I get to be an adult, you see the better. And it's just cool. I hope that these kids that are listening to this, because there's going to be those that listen to it, is understand that it's happening to you is not who you are. And that's one of the things I've had to realize. Life was happening to me. The adoption, the sexual abuse, feeling unloved, that was happening to me. It's not who I was. And now to be here across the table from you, someone that is in this space as an adoptee, I hope that you also see the work that you do doesn't go, unnoticed, because there's people out here like myself that have gone through those systems and failed me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't let that be the end all be all, right? That's just not who I was. So I love it. I wear this shirt all the time. I should have worn it today that said adopted across the shirt because that's how passionate I am about being an advocate and letting understand people understand that it's okay you're adopted. It's actually, as you mentioned, to me it was a second chance, and I was so happy that I was put into this position that I'm in. And not always is it going to be good. I can only imagine you've heard some stories as well. But I commend you for the work that you do. And now you're serving over Orchid serves over, which is organization that you're a part of. We'll talk about what your title and what you guys do, but you guys serve over 10,000 kids and families with over
Yes.
350 staff.
Yep.
What is your North Star when leading something that big and that personal?
The North Star is always putting children and families first. So ever since I dipped my toe into being a leader, when I would guide my teams, I say, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail forward. We're humans trying to help other humans. It's messy. It's complicated.
Hmm.
But as long as you can come to me and you can say that you put the best interest of a child or family first with whatever information you had at the time, we can deal with anything that comes after. So it's that constant just empathy of recognizing, going back to that mom, where were you for me? And showing up for people with a sense of empathy and recognizing that even people who do things that feel really horrible are deserving of dignity and respect, because how we treat people is a reflection of who we are, not a
Correct.
reflection of who they are.
Correct. Orchid, tell us a little bit about what you guys do. What is the whole mission behind it? Some of the programs, some of the services you guys offer.
Yeah, so Orchard's Children's Services is a child welfare agency. And I like to say that we provide the entire continuum of care for kids and families in our community. And so, certainly, when someone suspects abuse or neglect, they call Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services goes and they investigate. And sometimes they'll say, this kid's not so unsafe in their home that they need to be removed, but clearly this family needs help. And so Orchards, we have a very large and robust, we're the largest provider of family prevention services in the state. And that's something that we're really, really proud of, because that's that early intervention. It prevents kids from being removed. We know that they do better if we can keep them safely in their family of origin. And our team goes into the home and they spend hours and hours a week sometimes in a home working with whatever that family needs. Sometimes it's help, connecting to a better paying job. Sometimes it's help connecting to a food bank. Sometimes it's just, family relations, how to maybe parent your kid a little different, because going back to that story, they were never parented in a way that was
Hmm.
supportive of that parent and child interaction, right? Um, so certainly that's where the bulk of our services lie, but unfortunately sometimes kids cannot be maintained safely in their home and they do need to be removed. And so we recruit, we license foster parents, and we then place children in those foster homes and follow them through either their reunification journey or their adoption journey. And then just recently, a few years ago, we really recognized the need for mental health care access, particularly for the people that we serve who've experienced so much trauma. And we're specialists in providing services for trauma. And so we started a behavioral health unit, and we
I love
offer
that.
everything from really in-depth testing and assessment to help people understand how this child's brain and emotions have responded to whatever they've experienced, and maybe how to work with them in a different way that might help elevate them and help them heal a little quicker, to different therapy modalities that we know help people overcome trauma and the symptoms that are related with having experienced a lot of trauma in their life. So
I
all of
love that.
that culminates into about 350 staff and over 10,000 kids and families across the state of Michigan. And it's the privilege of a lifetime to be able to sit in my seat and lead this organization.
So huge. Where are you guys located?
So we have our flagship office in Southfield, Michigan, and then we have offices in Flint and Genesee County, Sterling Heights and Macomb County. We have an office in Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County, and contracts with the state that put us into every county throughout the entire state of Michigan. So we have a
Wow.
fingerprint everywhere.
Hey, real quick, if you enjoying the podcast, we first want to say thank you. And we also just want to give you a little insight of what we're up to at Francis. Some don't even realize that we're working with organizations to help them use AI to create that real human communication experiences, where that's actually supporting your families, those patients, or the entire community. We're actually creating tech that connects. Check it out, francis.ai. I love that. And what is your current role?
I'm the president and CEO.
And and how did that happen? Like, and it's not overnight. There's a story there. How did you one get into the organization where now you're working with adoptees? But what was that trajectory looking like? Did you start ground zero? Were you working somewhere else? How did you get here as a president, CEO?
Yeah, so my very first kind of foray into therapy, because I started out as a therapist. I'll say I'm a
Okay.
therapist at heart. I will die a therapist. All of the administrative stuff was just kind of, I seem to have a knack for it. But I started really working in a blended funding program serving kids in the child welfare system. And that just left such an impression on me. And unfortunately, due to different funding streams and other things that happened, I watched that program get unfunded despite uh, just enormous success. And I just remember feeling how unfair that felt to me at the time and thought, I want to be in a position to support clinicians like me so that they can go out and they can do what they love and they don't have to worry about all of these funding nuances that could take something from them that they hold so dear. And so at that point in time, I had a master's degree. I was licensed in the state, and I decided that if I was going to learn the business side, I needed to learn the business side. So I went to school. I got my PhD in business administration, and then started applying for administrative jobs and spent some time in the public mental health system here in the state. And then dipped my toe into federal government contracting for a while, serving veterans and running a behavioral health service line for veterans all across the country, which was just an amazing, amazing experience that helped me really grow my business acumen even further.
Yeah.
And then we had a very long time CEO here at Orchards who was retiring, and the board engaged a recruiter who happened to know me, and she knew a little bit about my personal story and my background, and
Yeah.
she called and said, "Hey, I think you might really be interested." And I thought, well, never hurts to interview, right? You think that.
Yeah.
And man, I met the people here and just fell in love and thought it went from doesn't hurt to interview to I am going to be just devastated if I screw up this opportunity.
Yeah.
So thankfully I didn't. Thankfully I made it through the rigorous interview process and landed here 2 years ago. And I'm just so
Wow.
thrilled.
It is full circle, right? You
Yeah.
adopted kids before you even knew that you were going to be running an organization where you're working with adoptees,
Yes.
and their families. How cool. Um, and it's you kind of talked about that mental behavioral, and really what it really does when people go through that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so cool that we can really openly talk about mental health nowadays because it is one of those things that I didn't know that I was really going through. I didn't. I knew that I would go 0 to 100. I knew you talked about a little bit about misbehaving in school, and it wasn't because I was just didn't want to be there, but life was happening to me. And some teachers will understand that there was something there, and they will definitely try to work with you, but not everyone understood that. And so I love that you guys are in that education piece, not just for the child themselves, but for the parents. I can imagine for those that may also seek help on how do we help these individuals that are in this space. How important is that? How important is that journey to make sure that as they're going through these processes, these systems, that mental health and seeing someone is crucial.
It is absolutely critical. So we have the medical evidence and the PET scans that show how our brains adapt to the environment that we're in. And so we know that even babies who are exposed to trauma, so imagine a
Hmm.
baby in their crib overhearing domestic violence in their home.
Mm.
That changes the way that baby's brain forms and adapts because our brains are amazing. We adapt to survive whatever environment we're in, right?
Yeah.
And so when kids come into care or when they've experienced trauma or you're in a home and the parents have experienced trauma, because this is the important piece, right, too, is that it's important to recognize that we can take the trauma away from the brain, but we can't take the brain away from the trauma immediately. So
Hmm.
you're going from 0 to 100 because something in your environment that you're not even clocking on a conscious level has
Yeah.
taken you there because it's reminding you of something, and your brain is saying, we need to do this and we need to do this now to survive. So
Hmm.
to help caregivers, whether that's a foster parent, whether it's a relative, whether it's biological parents, understand that this child is responding in a way that is just meant to survive. It depersonalizes it, right? This kid isn't
Yeah.
disrespecting me. This isn't about me at all. This is about them just trying to survive. And
Yeah.
then the backside to that story, and in my mind, the most important part of that story, is this idea of neuroplasticity. So you've heard the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's a
Yeah.
big fat lie. I'm here to myth bust that. Doesn't matter how old we get, we can learn new tricks. And so that's where the work that we do comes in, right? Teaching people how to interact differently, helping families build that relationship and that resilience in a different way actually retrains the neural pathways in our brains to be able to respond to the world around us in a really healthy way. That allows us to not just survive anymore, it allows us to thrive. And so talking about mental health, normalizing this, depersonalizing it, right? It is not a moral failing that someone's brain developed to thrive in a traumatic environment.
Hmm.
Let's say that louder for the people in the back, right? That is not a moral failing. That is a survival mechanism that we need to relearn how to survive in a different environment. So I would say that's one of the most important things that we can possibly do is to talk about it, demystify it, destigmatize it, and make sure that people get whatever help they need at the time that they need
Yeah.
it.
Believe it or not, I didn't get the help till I was 30 years old.
I
And
unfortunately I can believe that.
and it really was my wife. It was my wife that said. I remember one day, really after I became a parent, I think it really hit me even harder. I knew that I was having anger issues early in my relationship with my now wife, and she would always say to me, even if we don't work out, I want to help you heal. She knew that, when I got mad, she would tell me, and I would always remember her saying, when you get mad, I don't even know who you are. It doesn't even look like you anymore. And knowing who I was working to be and who I really was, it bothered me, that I was getting to that point where she felt scared. When in reality, I'm like, but that's not me. I'm not that person. Realizing that there was so much trauma, right? There were so many rooted issues, deep issues that I swept under the rug. I mean, I didn't tell anyone I was sexually abused till I was 21, 22 years old. And when I did, I started to cry because I felt like, one, maybe the weight off my shoulders. I never told that story, right? But also felt, and the reason I didn't tell it was I felt that I was going to be judged. I felt like, no one was going to believe me. And I remember at 30 years old when I first seen a therapist where I just broke down crying. I didn't know why. My wife she just had the baby, so she was going through postpartum, so that's why she was going. She said, "Hey, I have a session today, but I think it's really important that you go." And I did, not knowing what to expect. I just went there and just like a faucet, just said everything. And what I loved about that, and for those that are asking themselves, should I go, see a therapist? I say yes. I say that it's not that you're going to find that first one is going to be great. Sometimes I like to say it's like a relationship. You have to find the one you connect with. But even though I went to her one time, I still talk heavily about this lady because all she did was ask me questions that had all the answers to. But sometimes people don't ask questions in that way to make you think a little differently. It's all within the mind, right? It's a mindset. It's allowing to realize to yourself that, wait a minute, this is what happened to me. It's not who I am. Why am I thinking that I owe somebody something when in reality I don't owe anybody anything? That this is just the story that I've had to overcome. So there was so much that I had to really, and to this day, I'm not saying I'm perfect. To this day, there's still those things, but I realized that I don't go 0 to 100 so quickly anymore because of everything that I had to kind of work through. So I'm happy that you're talking about this because so many people won't have these conversations and they don't understand it and they don't seek the help and then they wonder why they go from 0 to 100. I remember being a 19-year-old kid going back and forth with my district manager just because I would get so mad, right? Sometimes just black out in a sense. And then the things that we do to kind of cope with that, right? Just had a friend talked about his coping. I think even my mom was drugs,
Hmm.
and in reality, it does no good for you. It really keeps you in that same place over and over. So I like that we're having this conversation. Do you have a story that maybe people can hear on how a family was changed because of the help of therapy?
Yeah, we have tons of them. Let me pick one out here. So we have a family that we've served here not too long ago that I was fortunate enough to hear their story. Um, and, you know, the situation was such when we entered in that there was some pretty significant domestic violence, there was significant substance abuse, and the children did have to be removed. And so we always start with a reunification plan because we know outcomes are better for kids if they can be
Yeah.
safely maintained, right, with their family and their community of
Mhm.
origin. And so, I think you've probably heard of like Maslow's hierarchy of need.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason I think something that is so rooted in psychology and behavioral health is kind of such a household name is because it's so true, right? So to your point, you can't think about gentle parenting, which is hard, right? You've got a toddler that's having a
Yeah.
tantrum because you won't let them put their finger in a light socket after you've just come home from your third job and you don't know if you're going to spend your money on heat, food, or medicine that month, right?
Mhm.
Because even two of the three aren't an option. You're doing everything everybody says to do. If you work hard, the money will come, the success will come, but you're working as hard as you can and it's still not
Mhm.
coming. And so, people turn to unfortunately bad coping skills, right? They turn
Yeah.
to substance use and then they become someone they don't recognize. And then, the between the pressure and the substance use, domestic violence comes into play. So these children were removed, and we did start a reunification plan. But again, we enter into services with that people first and that curiosity. And so to your point, not what did you do that got your kids removed? What's happened in your life that has brought
Mhm.
you to this point? What happened to you? And fortunately, these were parents who were like, kind of like what you said, like this isn't who I am. I recognize that I'm here and I'm at this lowest point in my life, but this isn't who I am and it's not who I want to be. And so it again started with let's enter into and link them with substance use abuse treatment, got them into the treatment, worked on all of that neuroplasticity with their own trauma. We saw them in our behavioral health unit. We offer an evidence-based practice called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR.
Mhm.
And so they were able to process and address their own trauma and then successfully reunite with their kids. And we just did our post reunification 12-month checkup. And so now you have a family of 5 kids living in a family unit. And through that, mom and dad did recognize that they probably weren't the best match together, that they were both great people on their own, but when they were in the same room together, there was just too much history for them to feel like they could make it work. So they did
Yeah.
separate, but they're co-parenting. And their kids get both their parents, and they get healthy parents.
Yeah.
So those are the stories, and those are the wins where you're
I
like,
love that.
this is why I get up every day and do what I do.
Yeah. I love that co-parenting on they realized they weren't a fit together, but they
Mm-hmm.
were able to do it as individuals and still come together. Maybe not in the same household. And I always feel like sometimes parents really do kids no good when they just think we got to do this for the sake of the child, because kids can see that. You mentioned about the energy in the room, seeing it, hearing it. They're kids are so smart. I have a 1 and a 4 year old, and I'm always in shock of the things that they know and they repeat and they say, because they truly do watch us all the time. Maybe they don't listen, but they're seeing, and sometimes they are also listening, right? When they're not in those rooms, and maybe they're hearing it through the walls. Um, I love that they were able to just say, "Hey, maybe we can't do this together, but we can definitely do this, separately in our own homes." And those kids got to see that, and see healthy parents, because it doesn't always work out that way. I love
Yeah,
this. I love that this is what you do for a living. Like, how cool! To me, it's cool
me
that you
too.
do this. Yeah. What would you say though to someone who judges biological parents in the system without actually understanding what got them there?
Well, I let they who are without sin cast the first stone, right? It be careful. So I'll liken that back to like some of my own experiences.
Hmm.
We've all messed up in life, right? We've all just screwed up and screwed up big time. And we've all had that one person who wants to remind us of just how bad we've screwed up. And maybe even months or years later, still throw that screw up back in our face, right? How do you feel, right? You feel dejected, you feel hopeless, you feel like I already know I screwed up, what's the point? Does it make you want to try? Does it make you want to be better?
Yeah.
Or have you had the experience? And I remember when I was in my early teens and went through a fairly rebellious phase, and was struggling with I guess this is just who I am. Maybe I'm just going to screw up. Maybe I'm just not, as
Yeah.
smart or as talented as I wanted to be. And I just had a teacher just look at me one day and she said, you know what? You are not the first student to do this. You will not be
Hmm.
the last. So get over it. Like, get over yourself, pick yourself
Hmm.
up to where you want to be and you know you're capable of being, and carry on with your life. Um, and,
And
and
boom, you're
so,
president of a whole organization.
yeah, I mean, and so it's the golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Be who you wish you had
Yeah.
when you messed
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Because,
That's why I went back to the high school to be for someone on what I wish I had.
yeah,
I started to mentor because I didn't have a male figure in my life. But how important is it to have a male, especially of color, show up to mentor other males of color and males in general? We
yeah.
don't see that too much in our school systems, males, teachers, male therapists. So it is really important to be for someone else on what I wish I had, because that's what it looks like to actually make impacts in our community. So I love that you said that, because that's the when people say, "Why do I do what I do?" It's exactly that. That's my answer, because I want others to never feel what I felt and have someone in their lives I wish I had, and I didn't, and I didn't know how to be a father, right? I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't see those things. I had to learn, still learning. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I've had to learn these things. So I love that you definitely mentioned that, because it is key. It's key to what developing the mind looks like, right? So kudo. I'm having a good conversation about this, and I hope that people are really listening. Can we talk about to those adoptees? So one of the things I've learned, I didn't get. You talk about the system. So I was adopted in Boston, and then moved to Florida. So as I graduated high school, they couldn't help me in Florida because I was adopted in Boston. They couldn't help me in Boston because I lived in Florida. Is there some things that you can kind of, I know the system, right? This is where we talk about Nicole.
Yep.
Whatever, like here I am. But there's so many great things and great assets that when someone's in these homes, whether it's a foster home or whether it's a group home, and they age out, there are so many benefits as well for them to continue to just seek assistance. Can you talk about some of those systems that maybe individuals don't know?
Yeah, so we have, youth, we call them youth in transition funds here. And so it could be everything from if you're currently in the foster care system as a foster youth, and for whatever
Mhm.
reason, you're not going to be adopted, right?
Yeah.
Um, you've got semi-independent living programs that teach you what we lovingly refer to as like adulting 101, how to,
Hmm.
balance your checkbook, how to pay bills, how to, clean your home, how to show up for a job interview, all of those types of things. And then we have voluntary foster care programs where you can voluntarily stay as a young adult. It does um, allow you access to some fundings where we can help them buy their first car, or maybe cover some car insurance, get them in their own apartment, and just kind of provide that ongoing support. But I would have to give a plug for Orchards here, and this was definitely predates me, but we did have a very generous donation that allowed us to create a fund where we maintain that natural support for all of our alumni. So if we've served you,
Love
you're
it.
an alumni of
Yeah.
Orchards Children's Services. And so, sometimes I'll get phone calls from folks they're your age now, they're in their 30s. And we served them back when they were 10, 11, 12 years old, and maybe they DoorDash, and they're making it, but they're kind of making it paycheck to paycheck and blow a tire. Hey, they don't have that family support to fix that tire,
Yeah.
or parents or grandparents that they can call, and they can call on us. and we'll cover that tire, and we're
I
gonna
love
make
that.
sure that they kind of keep on moving forward. So never underestimate the commitment and dedication of the nonprofits in your area. We're out there and we care, and we'll do anything and everything we can to make sure people are successful.
So good. Yeah, I just want to get out there because I think there's so many things that are of value that people just don't know.
Yeah.
And we're all about, right, educating those that may not know. Sometimes that assistance is in our own backyard at reach and we just don't know about it. So I love, and this is not just your organization. These are organizations across, the United States, across the country that do provide these things. It's find those in your city, find those that where you were, I'm guessing in my case, where you were adopted maybe, if you still live there. I don't know if this is still the same, okay? This is the years ago.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go to school and I couldn't. I ended up going to school, paying out my own pocket, but I knew that it was a thing, and I actually seen people. So that I had a friend. I was almost, I would say, fathering this young man, but he was 18 years old. He had just got out of the foster system, and now I think there's like a stipend that they give him as long as he continues school and all these different things. So what was happening is at the foster home he was in, they were actually charging him $500 for the room, but he was sharing it with four other kids, and it bothered me that he had to pay $500,
Hmm.
still was in school, to share a room with four other kids. And I'm 19 years old at this point, so I'm only maybe a year or 2 years younger than this man was. And I said, "Hey, you can live with me, but you still have to pay rent." I was charging him $300. I'm gonna help you get a job. I hope you get a car, and you still got to continue school. He was his last year of school or junior year, and he did. He moved in with me, and I would say he was such an amazing individual. I helped him get a car. He was one of my best employees, just living life, and all the help that he was getting for the government. Unfortunately, I lost him due to drugs. Right? They found him
Right.
in Vegas and things like that. But it was I seen how there was some help, but I also seen how there was still so much more need because I didn't realize he was going through a lot of things mentally, right? Like
Yeah.
because he was in his happy place. So when I did see him not so much in that same place, all he could remember was those times he was with me. And it just hurt me because it's like, man, he's stuck in the happy moments of his life and he didn't know how to move forward. And we tried and at some point I had to kind of realize that he's an adult just like I was an adult, and I had to have those difficult conversations. And unfortunately, we lost him, but I still keep him. I understood what he was going through, and there's so many kids that go through that and feel alone. And the way that his mom and father or his mother left to another country, never came back for them. Like, what is that kid really going through if they never see therapy? When he was separated from his sister and couldn't really see his sister, the only person that he knew, didn't have family, family didn't come looking for him. So there were just so many things that were playing. I'm a young kid, I didn't know all these things, but I wish I knew some of the things now, Nicole, that I would have known back then, right? To kind of help that. But we're learning, and we're educating others that are in this space that if you need the help, there are organizations out there, even if you were not through this foster system, there's still places that you can go and look out. So that's just kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, because you have so much insight, but also just educate people that are in this space, whether you're the parent or you're the child. That is not going to happen overnight. It is truly a work in progress. And I ask you, there has to be a personal checkpoint for you when you need to reset. This is a lot of work. Realign, maybe keep leading with heart. What is your personal checkpoint?
Oh, I mean, so for me, and to your point, I've been there. I've been to that point of just burnout in a really
Mhm.
unhealthy place.
Mhm.
So I'm fortunate enough that I have just one of the best partners ever in my husband. Um, we've been married
Kudos,
almost,
husband. Yeah,
yes,
baby.
male teacher. So he definitely
Yeah.
shows up in an elementary school, and
Love it.
he's one of my checkpoints and really my litmus test. And he's the one that'll just say, you're teetering on the edge. You need to step back for a minute. And so I can rely on him a lot. And then I've just found different things, um, you know, from working out and learning some boxing and fighting and getting kind of that
Okay.
physical piece out, to,
Mm.
and this sounds so corny, I'm going to tell on myself, but adult paint by numbers. Um, I do it. They're lovely. You can get them pretty cheap online. And I just like turn on a book on tape and for an hour or two can just sit and it just kind of resets and shuts
Yeah,
everything off and lets my mind kind of drift and focus. So it's all those things, that people tell you we should do. It's
yeah,
finding what elements of those work for us.
yeah.
And then kind of knowing, like, I'll know if I'm sleeping really bad. I love sleep. And if I'm not sleeping, like, for 2, 3 nights in a row, that's also just another tell of, all right, lady, you need to take a day off. You need to take some time for yourself and regroup.
Mine's is planting. You talk about paint by numbers. I just love
Yeah.
planting. So don't worry. We all have that thing that people probably don't know about us. And it's like, no way. My mind's, I just love to plant. I actually have so much I have to repot. And I'm like, I know when I do it, it's going to be so peaceful. So I just got to do it when my kids are napping or something. Because if not, my daughter's like, I want to help. And then she just starts dragging dirt all over the place and it doesn't become as peaceful.
Yeah.
But no, I love that you find something that really kind of gets you out there. But how about for your team? You said you lead 350 people who are all carrying heavy emotional work. How do you keep them grounded, hopeful, and focused when life is happening and sometimes they're carrying these stories like if it's their own?
Yeah, so I try to maintain as regular communication as possible to remind them
Mhm.
I'm still human too and that I'm here and I'm cheering for them because we're spread out all over the state.
Yeah.
And so I do this, I call it another leader that I knew and just admire her so much. I stole it from her, so I'll give her a shout out and kudos to her, but I call it 5 minutes on Friday. And every other Friday, I send out an all staff email. And it might be just keeping them in the know about different advocacy or different things that are going on in the agency. It could be sharing a good story. I've sent out things encouraging them to take their PTO and reminding them to care for themselves. That we don't glorify burnout here, and I'm not going to glorify burnout. I refuse to do that.
Yeah.
We've maintained a hybrid work schedule. I do not require any minimum amount of days in office. That's up to people's direct teams and supervisors and what you need to do for your job. Encouraging that work life balance and then celebrating the win. And some days the win is you went to court and you advocated and you took on somebody that seems to have much more power in the system than you did on behalf of a kid or a family. And some
Yeah.
days it's that you remembered to take your seatbelt off before you got out of the car. And both are equally important and both are equal wins, just depending on the day that you're having.
Yeah.
So I really think normalizing, to your earlier point, right, around mental health, normalizing this is hard work. And you are still just a human trying to help other humans. And so to give yourself that same grace that you would give anybody else.
I love that. And if someone's listening and wants to help but doesn't know where to start, what's one small move they can actually make today?
You could do your online research, find nonprofits, find charities in my
Mhm.
agency, in my organization, and you could put a card or postcard in the mail to all staff and just say thank you. I see you.
As simple as that.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes a difference. It truly does. I think people always think it has to be a donation of so much dollars, and it's not. It's that. It's the thank yous,
Yep.
right? They go a long way because it reminds us of why we do it. Sometimes we just do it because it's in us. We've been doing it for so long. But when we hear those things, I can imagine you talk about that 10-year-old that called that when he was 30, like, can imagine you just lit up like, see, this is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
That we can help in a time of need because you could have been probably in a higher paying job if you wanted to, but it wasn't about the paycheck. I always say that it's not about the paycheck. It's about the purpose and the passion that you have to do what you do, especially that now you've been in the world of adopting, right? It hits you even more that you're in this space. So I love it. I love that you're at this head of the table, but you've also experienced what that looks like as a mom that had to adopt two young girls and raise them as your own. And they are yours, and I can only imagine your daughters right now are just thriving and just so happy and will continue to give back because their mom is giving back to this day. She's still giving back every single day, and I'm pretty sure that you'll give back to the rest of your life. So pretty cool. What's your vision for a child welfare system that finally acts like a real safety net?
So you gave me the perfect opening, and it's lived experience. I think the parents who have been through the system and are on the other side should be able to inform how we show up for people tell us what they wished we would have done differently or
Hmm.
instead. And I think the kids that have been most impacted by this system should hold the key leadership and governance positions that tell us how the system should be. I think we are starting to recognize the value of that lived experience. We're starting to pay a little bit more lip service to it in terms of like peer supports and things in different places. But I think we need to take the leap, and I think we need to put the
Yeah.
people impacted by the system in charge of the system.
I agree. The thing that I feel though, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when people like age and become my age or something, they just don't really talk about it. Are you seeing that often? Like people don't come back to advocate for where they once used to be?
Actually, I'm seeing the opposite.
Okay,
Um,
good, good, good,
so
good.
I'm really proud. Our board chair, so the man heading the entire governance of Orchards Children's Services, received our services as a young man, and he's
Nice.
talked about that openly. And we just our board of directors just voted in a brand new board member who was adopted by our
Oh
agency
yeah.
when he was 2 years old, and he wanted to come back into the system and found us. So I think it's amazing. Now, I will preface this with saying that, you know, if someone's an adoptee, if they were in the foster care system, you don't owe your story to any of us. You don't owe
Correct.
any of us anything. Um, but if you feel compelled to share that, if you feel compelled to change the system in some way, shape, or form, oh, I encourage you to do it.
Yeah. And compelled to just change lives,
Yes.
right? It doesn't even have to be at the place of going back to the system. Just share that story. It resonates so much when you can. So that's why I go to the schools to resonate, to share that story and hope that it resonates with someone, right? Like the things I've had to overcome. When I was in school, it wasn't something I was talking about. But now that I'm out of school, I'm like, man, we were all going through something. We all have a story. You know, whether you were adopted, whether it was domestic violence happening at home, there was, addictions happening at home. There was so many things that kids were just showing up to school with, and you never know because there was always a smile on their face. They were just
Yeah.
sweeping it under the rug. Sometimes school was just kind of their space of being free. I always talked about going to work. I felt free. Going to school, I felt free. And so many times I love that you have two males at least that and probably more, but that are being the voice to these males are so important in this space. So that kudos to those men as well. What can we find more of your organization? What's the website? Are you guys on socials?
Yep, we're on Instagram, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, all the typical socials, and then our website is orchards.org. So,
Okay. All right. Well, all right, listen, I'm put you in the hot seat. This is the last question, blind question. If you're giving your life to a system that doesn't always give back, what's one moment that nearly broke you and what made you stay anyway?
whew. Um, so the moment that nearly broke me uh, was I had been working with a subset of people for years, um, and really and truly believed that this family should be together. And I watched the system take supports that I knew the system was perfectly capable of providing and deny them.
Mm,
And I watched a family lose their kids because they were poor. Um, and that nearly broke me. Um,
wow.
but instead of breaking me, I let it make me angry. And I channeled that anger into sitting in the seat I sit in today. Um, so that if I have an opportunity to leverage funding, leverage programming, leverage something to make sure that a family can stay intact after they've worked so hard, I now have the power to do that.
And we thank you. And what a way to end it. Nicole, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your raw, transparent conversation here today. We appreciate you giving back to those that are in the system, right? You adopted two little girls of your own, but you're also sitting at the head of the table, as you just mentioned, to continue to fight for those that go through this, for continue to fight a system that at the moment doesn't align with what's really going on in the world. So I appreciate for what you've done, guys. If you guys want to know how you how more you can actually help is share these conversations. These are conversations that parents need to hear, that children need to hear, those that are thinking of adoption need to hear. And Nicole, I wish you nothing but more success. I can only imagine this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg right here, but there's so much more that is coming your way just because you continue to just give. Guys, we thank you. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Efrain. This is Nicole. We'll catch you on the next one. Laters.